presentation will address some of the substances that are driving the synthetic drug trends, such as synthetic cannabinoids, things like K2 and Spice Gold, and designer stimulants, more commonly known as bath salts, and more recently Molly, a form of MDMA. We'll also cover the latest drug testing developments that make it possible to maintain a drug-free workplace, hold people accountable, and get people help they desperately need. Slide. So the first drug we're going to talk about is Molly. Slide. Headlines tell the trends of abuse, and you've heard it all over the news. You've seen it in the paper. People that are dying because of abuse of the drug, what they're calling Molly, but it's actually MDMA, and often MDMA cut with a variety of other compounds. Slide. So what is Molly? Well, if we go back to the 1950s to the 1970s, Molly, or black Molly, was used to refer to methamphetamine. It now has an entirely different meaning. In 2003, the DEA identified the contents of capsules called Molly as TFMPP, which is a piperazine and a hallucinogen. In 2013, Molly is now a powdered form of MDMA cut with almost anything from cocaine to heroin, including methadone, which is a bath salt, and TFMPP and DHA. Both of these are, one is a hallucinogen and the other one is an amphetamine stimulant. Very popular in electronic dance music, in hip-hop, and in the rap cultures. And the number of songs refer to Molly. And you may remember Madonna got into all kinds of trouble in the news because at one of her concerts, she went on stage and yelled out, "Where's Molly?" which seemed that she was promoting the use of these drugs. Well, everyone's seen Molly. The Molly in question is the latest purportedly purified version of MDA, also known as ecstasy. Its new monkeyer was derived from the word molecule. New York Times, September 18th this year, the New York City Medical Examiner confirmed that 2 young people who died at the Electronic Zoo Festival on Randall's Island over Labor Day weekend took fatal doses of drugs sold in the street that are known as Molly. One person actually died from MDMA or ecstasy. The other died from a mixture of MDMA and methadone, which is bath salts. Wall Street Journal, 9/17/13. Federal authorities say they have infiltrated an international synthetic drug trafficking ring and made 54 arrests. The group dealt in the stimulant methadone, commonly known as Molly. The Washington Post, 9/13. Fairfax County Police have seized in recent months nearly 17 pounds of the club drug Molly, a purified form of ecstasy. So is Molly. Do we really know? The answer is no, we don't. They're selling all kinds of products on the street and calling it Molly, and it could be anywhere from pure MDA to MDMA cut with any number of the synthetic drugs that are being sold on the market now. So what is MDMA? MDMA is 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, also known as X or ecstasy, and now Molly. Metabolite of MDMA is MDA, 3,4-methylene dioxyamphetamine. So just like methamphetamine breaks down to amphetamine, MDA breaks down to MDA. It's a stimulant and hallucinogen. It is a Schedule 1, and it has been added to the federal drug testing requirements as of October 2010. Well, what about Molly? Well, Molly costs anywhere from $15 to $50 for a single dose, and as much as $100 per gram. The size is about 80 to 100 milligrams for a recreational dose and 180 grams for a high dose. MA is most often ingested orally, although inhalation and injection have been reported. The general effects appear within 20 to 60 minutes. The high levels off to a plateau, which lasts for about 2 to 3 hours. And this is followed by a gradual coming down sensation, accumulating in a feeling of fatigue. And what often happens is if people are not familiar with the use of MDMA, they'll take MDMA not realizing it can take as long as an hour to have the effects, then take another dose. And that's where a lot of the youth of America is getting into trouble now, because they're taking multiple doses of these drugs, and unfortunately the drug has serious side effects. What are the effects of MDMA? Well, it's the hug drug. It causes you to have empathy for others. It reduces inhibitions. It causes dehydration or dry mouth, which means they're going to want to drink water. What happens, unfortunately, is a lot of these people superhydrate. And when you superhydrate, you interrupt your electrolytes. And when you interrupt your electrolyte imbalance, it can cause heart failure. It also short-circuits the signal to the brain controlling temperature. Temperatures have gone up as high as 107 to 109 degrees, basically cooking your organs from the inside out. Combined with the dry mouth and dehydration and the high body temperature, people continually drink that water and superhydrate. It causes teeth grinding. You'll see a lot of users of this product with pacifiers, a lot of candy pacifiers in their mouth. It suppresses the need to eat or to sleep. People who go to raves can party for days without feeling the effect before they crash. Dilated pupils, overall stimulation of the body. All said, Great Britain is researching the use of MDA in various treatment regimes. Why? Because it affects serotonins. Serotonins are the feel-good chemicals in the body. That's why people take these drugs. Now, these are actual warnings from a website telling the user what to be aware of and what dangers could occur. And they give you interactions with drugs. MAOs. Do not take MDMA if you're currently taking prescription MAOIs. These are commonly found in prescription antidepressants. And then they give you a list. MDA and MAOIs are potentially dangerous combinations. Dangerous interaction. Proteinase inhibitors. Avoid taking MDMA if you're currently taking a proteinase inhibitor. This may be a life-threatening combination. Unfortunately, drug users are not going to the website to see what the interactions are. They're informed about the dangers of these drugs. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the danger of overheating. MDMA can lead to hypothermia, the overheating of the body, especially in those who are exerting themselves for long periods of time on the dance floor. It's important for users to pay attention to their bodies and make sure they're not overheating. Take breaks from dancing. Step outside if the temperature in the room becomes too hot. Make sure you drink enough water, but not too much water, because, again, you'll interrupt your electrolyte imbalance. Additional warnings. Individuals with sensitivities vary widely. A small percentage of users seem to react with extreme sensitivity to MDMA and experience overly strong effects at normal doses, including hypothermia, which is the electrolyte disturbance, unconsciousness, seizures, and other serious medical problems. Stimulant combinations can be dangerous. Avoid other strong stimulants. A lot of times, as we said, these drugs are mixed with things like bath salts, methamphetamine, some of the synthetic amphetamines. So it can really create issues with heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature. Poisoning. Some ecstasy users overreact to the overheating and dehydration by obsessively over-drinking. When drinking large amounts of water, it's important to mix in a sports drink or a salty snack. Again, they're trying to prevent the electrolyte imbalance. Avoid the very real dangers of water poisoning. Low salt, which cause serious health problems, including death. MDMA can cause changes in the body's antidiuretic hormone, leading to a much higher susceptibility to overloading of water, hypoatremia. Drink water, but don't drink too much. Seizures. A small number of MDMA users have reportedly had seizures after taking only a moderate amount of pure MDMA, and this is common in smaller women with higher doses. So does ecstasy actually impact mental health? Well, in terms of average personalities and mental health, ecstasy use users are distinctively different from non-drug users. In particular, ecstasy users have a higher rate of mental illness than both non-drug users and users of other prohibited drugs. And if you look at the chart below, you have almost 70% of mental illnesses for the individuals who are using ecstasy. So they're going to be on drugs like antidepressants. It's a real issue that the youth of America is totally unaware of. Look at some statistics. The National Drug Abuse Warning Network found that from 2004 to 2009, there was a 123% increase in the number of emergency room visits involving MDMA taken alone or in combination with pharmaceuticals, alcohols, or both. According to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, past month users of MDMA, ecstasy, increased by 37% between 2008 and 2009. Unfortunately, we don't have any more recent statistics, but we know that the usage is going up. We're seeing it in the news. We're seeing it in more positives in the lab. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration indicated that ecstasy-related emergency room visits rose from 10,220 in 2004 to 17,865 in 2008, a 74.8% increase. Below is emergency room visits from 2001. You can see at the time cocaine was the highest, but ecstasy was still at 5,542. So tremendous increases every year in the individuals being affected by ecstasy and being taken to the emergency room. MDMA tablet analysis. This is what's being promoted for the users of MDMA. This is a website where you can go to, and if you're an MDMA user, if you're a teen or a young adult using these products, you can actually send the compounds in and they will analyze them for you and tell you what's in your MDMA, quote, Molly tablet. Compound analysis detect wide ranges of drugs, including other designer drugs, research chemicals, prescription medications, stimulants, designer stimulants, and the drugs associated with bath salts. And we have a list of some of the drugs that were found. Methylone, which is one of the salt type drugs, MCPP, TFMPP, 4-fluoroamphetamine, 4-MEC, 2-CE, which is also known as Europa, a controlled substance, methamphetamine, zolpidem, which are Z drugs, Ambien, caffeine, DXM, which is dextromethorphan, metocloprid, and 2CB, another designer drug that's controlled as of last year. You never know what's going to show up in your Molly that you're buying when they go to these events, to these concerts. Can it be detected by drug testing? Yes. Molly typically contains pure methylene dioxymethamphetamine, or MDMA. However, it may also include a wide range of other drugs, including designer drugs. We do have standard panels that will detect MDMA. MDMA is part of your DOT panel. For those clients that are using a DOT lookalike panel, we're already testing for MDMA, MDA, and MDEA. There are other designer drugs, however, that could be in these, such as the 2CE, the 2CB. All of these drugs are not going to be picked up in a routine panel. It does offer a designer stimulant panel, which detects 21 designer stimulants, including MDMA, and some of those that we've already mentioned. This will allow you to detect not only the ecstasy, but what they're cutting the ecstasy with. Now we're going to move on to K2 and Spice. A little bit more information on these drugs. It's constantly changing. There's a wide range of designer drugs that have gained popularity over the last few years. you've got the synthetic cannabinoids, which numerous compounds of herbal smoking blends sold as an alternative to marijuana, and your designer stimulants, things like metrodome, MDPV, cathinone, methcathinone, methylone, ethylone, butylone. These are sold as things like bath salts, plant food, some of them even as glass cleaner. The headlines tell the story. The drugs were finally, not all drugs, but some of the drugs were banned last year, and the ban included the MDPV and methylone, which are bath salts, and in addition to that, a large number of designer hallucinogens. Synthetic marijuana is now the third most reported substance used by U.S. high school students. Why? Because they know no one's testing for these, or very few people are testing for these. Users report using the drug to avoid positive drug tests. They turn to marijuana use when they're not being tested. So teenagers today know how to get around the test. They know that most of the schools that are doing testing and most companies that are doing testing are only testing for marijuana. They're not testing for the synthetic marijuana compounds. Reasons for synthetic marijuana popularity. Why did it become so popular? Well, it became so popular because there's so many chemicals to choose from. You have chemical compounds that actually mimic the effect of marijuana, but may be anywhere from 4 to 100 times stronger than marijuana. Their easily modified chemical structures allow chemists, the ones that are wearing the black hats, to stay in front of DEA regulations. And some of the newer generation products that are out there are still legal. They've not been controlled by either states or by the federal government. They're fully distributed. They're accessible online. They're typically ordered on a routine test panel. Spend your weekend getting high and show up for a drug test with no worries. They're known by any number of names. Lots of them are listed on this slide, but there are thousands of products out there that you can buy. Well, what are the effects of using the synthetic marijuana compounds? Well, in an unpublished study that I conducted, I found that the drug impacts the user very much like marijuana. However, the initial onset is much, much shorter. They have to wait for marijuana to feel the high. But the duration effect is also shorter. It only lasted for around 30 minutes, whereas a marijuana high will last longer than that. So what happens is individuals who are using these products are going to be much like crack cocaine users. They're constantly chasing that high because it doesn't last for a very long time. So how would it impact the individual at work? Well, these are similar to marijuana. The effects are going to be similar to marijuana. You're going to have similar impairment issues, hand-eye coordination, depth perception, short-term memory loss. These are all things that are going to impact an individual if they're using marijuana. Slide. Social high abuse trends in the United States. This is very, very interesting. You have to remember that there are over 450 synthetic marijuana compounds that we know of, and they're constantly making new ones every day. So in 2010, pre-temporary ban, K was the most popular brand in the United States, and the active ingredients found in K2 were JWH-018, 073, and JWH-250. So we had very few preparations that we were dealing with. Temporary ban went into effect, listing 5 compounds, which were the ones that we were picking up routinely, 18, 73, and 250. Well, in 2011, the abuse patterns post-temporary ban changed. Now we started seeing drugs like AM2201, WH210, and JWH081. When the final bill was passed, drugs were added. So what has happened post in 2012, after the federal ban? Now we're in the third generation brands that are available. Active ingredients such as XLR11, UR144, AM2201, JWH122. What happens is we can test some of these, but not all of these. Alere verifies the extensive manufacture and use of many of the newer products, and in some cases, unregulated chemicals. Preparation and abuse have and will continue to evolve based on the federal regulations. As soon as they outlaw a drug, they're going to go to another drug to see if they can get by with that one. Slide. So when we look at state laws, initial lack of federal prohibition made it easy to purchase these drugs, and many states took the effort to ban them prior to the federal ban. And at least 44 states have legislatively banned synthetic cannabinoids. And you can go to the website listed and the National Conference on State Legislature and find exactly which types of synthetic cannabinoids are banned in your state. Slide. Federal law. Well, as of last summer, September 9th, 2012, Obama signed into the effect the Synthetic Drug Abuse Prevention Act and it instituted a ban on 31 designer drugs. The original ban identified 15 synthetic marijuana drugs and 5 drug classes as Schedule I drugs. A conviction would bring serious criminal penalties for possession or sale, and it's now punishable for up to 20 years. They also increased the duration of time for emergency control. What drugs were actually banned back in July of 2012? Well, you had 5 drug classes, and they're listed, and then you had 15 individual drugs that were listed. And these drugs are all routinely tested and early identifiable. Well, another emergency schedule ban. As of May of this year, the DEA continues to act against synthetic drugs. The agency targets 3 substances used to make so-called fake pot and bath salts. To the emergency Schedule I temporary ban by DEA were UR144, third-generation compound, XLR11, another third-generation compound, and ABK48, again, another third-generation compound. So we're going to be looking now toward fourth generation to see what they come up with. There has been a decline in calls to the Poison Control Center. Calls to the U.S. Poison Control Center are lower than in recent years for both K2 and Spice. And after peaking in 2011 at 705 calls, the number of calls for synthetic marijuana declined all the way through present date in 2013. Calls have remained stable at around 250 a month. Decreases in calls related to heightened media exposure about negative effects of these drugs, as well as recent bans on the substance. But you have to be careful. Please pay attention. Is the user now better educated and have figured out how to use safer drugs that they don't have to go now to the Poison Control Center to find out what they do? Because all the bad press about all the bad trips that people were having, have they improved the quality of the products that they're making now? And that could be what we're seeing. In the third and possibly fourth generation products, we're seeing an improved quality in products so that you're now not having the bad effects from the trips. You're also having new drugs that we can't detect. Are positives being detected? Yes, they are. Late 2010 analysis found alarming positive rates of 30 to 35% for court-ordered juvenile probation departments throughout the U.S. Remember, that was pre-temporary ban. Early 2011 reports indicated a slight decline in the positive rate. Well, this is post-temporary ban. So we know what drugs we're testing for. The results are we had a slight lowering of the positive rate. Around that same time, the Georgia court system sent in 1,000 samples for analysis and had about a 15% positive rate. National Laboratory Certification Program surveyed all the NLCP certified laboratories, and 6 labs provided data having a positive rate anywhere from 2 to 50%, with an average of about 20.5%. If we could Alere workplace specimens from November of 2012 to February of 2013, we had a positive rate of about 8.75%. Alere criminal justice specimens in February of this year, we had a positive rate of about 1.57%. So we're still seeing higher rates in the criminal justice system than we are in routine workplace samples. Alere Redwood Toxicology, our sister lab, in court-ordered testing and drug treatment segments, averaged a positive rate for cannabimetrics have remained stable at about 10%, and that's through May of this year. Can the drugs be detected? Well, this is the current list of cannabinoids that we're testing, synthetic cannabinoids that we're testing with at Alere Toxicology. You'll notice we have some of the third generations. The UR144 and the XLR11 are also included in here. So it's a very extensive panel. Obviously, not everything on the market, but a very extensive panel to test for these drugs. Now we'll move on to designer stimulants. Slide. Again, let's look at the headlines. Zombie drug bath salts, more potent than meth. This is the type of headlines we've been seeing for years. This is the drug that causes people to bite parts of people's face off, attack people, to kill friends and family. It's a violent drug, a very violent drug. Slide. So exactly are designer stimulants? Well, similar to K2 and Spice, designer stimulants are products that are produced in clandestine laboratories and sold online or at smoke shops. And fortunately, even when states and the federal government have passed laws, you can still go into shops and find these hang up at gas stations and little mom-and-pop grocery stores, and they're still selling these products. Prometheus bath salts or research chemicals or plant food. Product labeling attempts to circumvent regulations by suggesting they're not for human consumption. The active ingredients can many of the compounds, things like metrodome, methylone, MDPV, and many others. Additional forms of designer stimulants may be sold as legal MDA or legal X, or even veiled as MDA tablets such as Molly. They abused. All marketed as bath salts, plant food, glass cleaner, pretty much anything that they can convince you to buy that you would think would not be a drug. Most users snort the product. Some people have injected it. While so-called bath salts appear to affect the user in ways similar to amphetamines and cocaine, reports concerning aggression, tachycardia, paranoia, and suicide suggest they may be more acutely toxic. Really have no idea what the long term of any of these designer drugs is going to be on the human body. None, because they're not for human consumption. So you can't go out and do some type of study to see how these are going to affect an individual long term. Why do you use these drugs? What are the effects that they're using them for? Well, a feeling of physical and mental well-being, exhilaration, and euphoria. Some of these drugs cause the release of the serotonins, the feel-good drugs. They cause increased alertness, energy, and motor activity. And they postpone hunger and fatigue. Individuals who go to rave parties will party and dance for days. The U.S. Poison Control and National Drug Intelligence have all issued alerts noting nationwide emergency room visits related to these drugs. Slide. Your only technical slide for this presentation. This is Cathinone. Down on the left of your screen is what Cathinone looks like. Cathinone comes from the cat plant, and Cathinone is one of 6 chemical compounds found in the addition to Cathinone. If you look at the on your right, R's, R1, R2, R3, R4 are positions on this compound where we can change the chemical structure. From this single compound, we can make 43 new designer drugs. And that's just one of 6 other compounds that are found in the cat plant. Nature has given us a multitude of plants that we can go to and take compounds and make designer drugs. Slide. Metrodome or drone is actually a derivative of Cathinone. It is sold on the internet as plant food. It's an amphetamine-like stimulant drug. Has caused a number of deaths in the UK. Last year, it was banned and is now a Schedule I drug. Bath salts, the most commonly used compound for bath salts is MDPV, methylene dioxyprovarilone. It's normally inhaled. It is a stimulant, very, very similar to cocaine. It is illegal in the United States. It is illegal in the UK. A number of deaths have been associated with this compound. It causes compulsive use, and it is not for human consumption. And it clearly states it on their packaging, and they do it to prevent litigation. I put this slide in here because I found this very interesting. This is an actual website, the Shanghai China Quality Chemical Company. This is, I highlighted in red. Did someone say free sample? Yes, they have promotion on several of their chemicals, and they list them. And you'll notice Methylon, Metrodome, MDPV, all of these are bath salt type compounds. 1 gram free sample to new customers. The customer must pay shipping and handling costs, and that's it. And you get free gram, and a gram is a tremendous amount of this product. And notice you can buy this in bulk in kilogram quantities or more. This is a great example of repackaging. This product was originally sold as bath salt, and it originally contained MDPV. Once the ban last year was put on MDPV, this product was reworked and remarketed. You'll notice now the little sticker on the label, it says does not contain Metrodome, MDPV, or methylone. What did they do? They started using provarilone. And provarilone is actually part of the molecule methylene dioxyprovarilone, or MDPV. Now, it's not federally controlled, but it is controlled in a number of states, and those states are listed. You can see if they're controlled in your state. So what are the effects of MDPV? Generally violent. It causes increased heart rate. It causes hallucinations, paranoia, seizures, kidney failure, extreme violent behavior, and very often death. It's not a good drug to play around with, and it can create real problems. As I said before, this is the drug that you see news where people are biting off chunks of people's bodies and attacking friends and family, killing friends and family. It's a very dangerous drug. Well, look at the state laws. Bath salts have been easily and legally available for many years. At least 43 states and Puerto Rico have legislatively banned substituted cathinones. Those are your bath salts. And information on which ones are banned in your state can be found at the website listed. The law only bans 2 of the bath salt compounds, and MDPV and Metrodome. It does ban other synthetic hallucinogens, but only 2 of the bath salt products. And when we look at the list of products that have been banned, Metrodome and MDPV are at the top, and you see your designer drugs. This is your alphabet soup. 2CE, which is Europa, which is a hallucinogen. 2CD, 2CC, 2CI, 2CT2, 2CT4, 2CH, 2CN, and 2CP. All of these are designer hallucinogens. Very easy to make. All is changing something on that molecule, and that's why they all have the same prefix. So they're easy to manipulate these and make new drugs. Now, this is a list of 15 compounds that were originally on the bill but have been struck from the bill. And what's the first one on the list? Methylone. And methylone is very, very commonly found on the internet, as is ethylene. In the lab, we're actually seeing positives for alpha PPP and alpha PVP. Again, not controlled under federal law. They may be controlled under state law, but not under federal law. So can these drugs actually be detected? Yes, they can. And Alere does offer a panel, an extended panel, that tests for a number of the compounds, both those that are controlled and those that are not controlled. And here on the screen is a list of the compounds, and you'll see that a lot of drugs in this compound are also things that they're using to cut MDMA, things like 4-MEC and TFMPP. These methylone, these are being used to cut your MDMA, your ecstasy, or your Molly. So they can be picked up along with MDMA and MDA on this extended stimulant panel. Now I'll be happy to take any questions. My email address is up there, and as is a number of email addresses where you can get some very good information. We'll now have a question and answer session.
Pat, this is Bill Current, and I'm going to be monitoring the Q&A section. And we have a question here from one of our attendees. Is CAT used to produce any cathinone analogs, or is it mostly synthetic?
It's used to produce the analogs, yes. That's where cathinone comes from. It comes from the cat plant, and Metrodome comes from the cat plant. So yes, they're using compounds in the cat plant that are found from the cat plant. Now, they're not actually using the cat plant itself to extract these compounds. They've been identified from the cat plant, but now making these synthetically.
Okay. I ask you to help me with this word, but have you seen any desomorphine?
Crocodile. Yeah, crocodile. We're actually not testing for crocodile. It can be tested for. Obviously, desomorphine is a fairly easily identified compound, and we're not seeing it because we're not testing for it. I am sure that it has infiltrated the U.S. It's been around in Europe for several years. They usually move very quickly from Europe to the U.S., so I'm sure it is being used. It's a replacement for heroin. I don't know that the usage in the United States will be as great as it was in urine because of all the publicity about getting gangrene at the injection site. And I think that it will discourage users in the U.S. from using that particular product that much. Now, hardcore heroin users are going to use anything, but you're not going to have, I don't think you're going to have kids experimenting with this product based on the fact of the results of using it.
Okay. And for this next question, I'm going to take us back to slide number 30. So you discussed some of the positivity results that Alere is experiencing. The third bullet and the third and second bullets from the bottom place positive rates between November 2012 and February 3rd, 2013, and then under the criminal justice. So the question is, and I think you sort of referred to this, but I'll give you a chance to comment further. The positivity rate in the workplace is low, or at least it appears low here, and actually almost twice as high in the criminal justice. For somebody who's looking at these statistics and thinking, why did I test for these drugs? It looks like it's pretty low positivity rates. How would you respond to that?
Are low positivity rates. I mean, there's no question that they're low positivity rates, because I would say the vast majority of the abusers of drugs like the bath salts are not going to be in the workplace. You know, you have to look at the type of testing you're doing and the type of employees you're testing. And I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of bath salt usage for individuals that are holding down jobs that require them to function properly at work. Most of these samples are probably from pre-employment, and I don't have that broken out as to whether they're pre-employment or presently employed, but I would venture to say that most of these are probably from pre-employment testing. As far as the criminal justice system, you're always going to see a higher percentage of any drug in the criminal justice system than you do in workplace testing. Just because of the types of individuals you're testing. And yes, they are low, and they're low because obviously we're not testing for everything. We can't test for everything, and unfortunately, particularly when you deal with the criminal justice system, they're educated enough to know what laws are out there and what they can be busted for, and they know what not to use. So they know that, and what happens a lot, quite honestly, is a lot of people are using an on-site test to pre-screen, particularly in criminal justice. They're using an on-site test to pre-screen for the presence of the synthetic cannabinoids. And some of those kits out there only test for 1 or 2 synthetic cannabinoids. They're not testing for the large number that we are when we take it to LC-MS. And so you're getting negative results, but they very well may be false negative results. So you have to look at the on-site test kits that you're using and see what your cross-reactivity is. Even those that have cross-reactivity to maybe 5 or 6 synthetic cannabinoids. You're not going to get cross-reactivity to the large number that we're actually testing by the more sensitive and accurate instrumentation.
And actually that addressed one of the questions one of our attendees had about detecting some of these substances with the instant devices. But specifically as far as Molly goes, or MDMA, is the with the majority of the instant testing devices that are being used today.
If you've got an instant testing device that includes MDMA, definitely pick up Molly if it's in fact being used. Now, some of the on-site test kits, the methamphetamine will cross-react Molly at about a 50% accuracy rate, or about, if you're using a 1,000 cutoff, you'd need about 1,500 of MDMA to test positive. But you really need to have the MDMA test strip to make sure that you are, in fact, picking up the compounds.
Okay. And what about detection times for these designer stimulants?
Stimulants, because we can't do studies on these compounds, it's basically we're looking at similar compounds and what is the detection window for similar compounds. So, we know for methamphetamine and MDMA, your detection window is about anywhere from 24 to 72 hours, depending on how heavy an individual is using. And the designer stimulants are going to be about the same. Looking at a shorter window, obviously, than for the synthetic marijuana. Now, synthetic marijuana, again, we don't really know. Those that are structurally similar to marijuana, we believe the detection window is going to be similar to marijuana. If you've got a heavy user, then you want to allow 30 days, but if you've got a social user, it can clear in as little as 5 days.
Okay. Please keep going.
No, I say, but there is no hard, fast study because you're not allowed to use them in humans. So we have no analytical data to say for this particular compound the clearance is. All we can do is base it on the similarity to other structurally similar compounds.
Okay. Another attendee asks, what medications will cause positives for ecstasy?
On an immunoassay screen?
I'm going to say yes. That's
yeah. If you're talking on an immunoassay screen, you might, depending on the kit you're using, you might get cross-reactivity with methamphetamine. And you might, if you're only testing for MDMA, methamphetamine possibly could give it, but you'd have to look at the package inserts for the particular kit that you're using to see if you have any cross-reactivity.
Okay. Now, can there be false positives with the use of quote-unquote pre-workout supplements?
Not mass spec or LCMS. With on-site testing devices, you always have the possibility of a false positive, always. That's why you have to have confirmation anytime you have a suspect positive with an on-site testing device. That possibility always exists. When you take it to the confirmatory method of either LCMS-MS or GCMS, you're not going to get a false positive.
Okay. Just over a little bit with a previous question, but I think there's a little bit of a unique angle to it. One of our attendees asked, with all these additional drugs, should non-DOT companies, I guess companies that are not mandated by the DOT regulations to test, should they test for at a 10-panel drug that includes some of these substances instead of the 5-panel look-alike?
You know, I've always felt that the DOT, and I'm an inspector for Sam Labs, but I've always felt that the DOT was too restrictive, and that if you truly want to have a drug-free workplace, you need to look for more drugs than are included under the DOT drug screen. Not just these synthetic drugs, but more importantly, your synthetic opiates. Things like hydrocodone, hydromorphone, oxycodone, oxymorphone, which under the DOT are not included. Those drugs, I think, absolutely need to be included in every drug screen test that's done, is an extended opiate panel. Some companies have taken the route because of the cost involved of alternating what drugs they include in their test panel. In other words, they include in their test panel for 3 months or whatever bath salts, and the next 3 months make it synthetic marijuana, and then the next 3 months include something else. And for those of you who have policies that are old, you need to update your policies and look at them, because Darvon, propoxyphene, is nowhere made in the United States. So a lot of older drug programs include propoxyphene as one of the drugs in their 10 panel that they look for. They'll include things like methaqualone and propoxyphene. Methaqualone hasn't been made since the 1980s in the United States, and Darvon was discontinued last year. So if you have those 2 drugs in your policy, you need to take those out and put 2 other compounds in, because if it's made in the United States, you're not going to see it.
Okay. Boy, we've got a lot of questions, Pat, and we're getting close on time. But we've got time for a few more questions. Let me take you to Good one. Can you talk about how different synthetic marijuana compounds are discovered? Can you also talk about how quickly a compound can make it into an Alere test after it's been discovered? And I think you sort of addressed that during the presentation when you talked about how Alere is constantly looking for the various chemical compounds that are being brought to market, but I'll let you address that.
Right. You know, as far as how soon can they make a new compound, that depends on how much money the manufacturers want to spend on research. But we know there are 450 out there now, at least that many, possibly more, that have been made for years. And what happens is when the patents run out, the Chinese get the information and start producing the drugs. Now, once they start producing the drugs and the drugs are sold on the Internet, there's a lot of things to consider before Alere adds them to one of their panels. There's no point in us adding it if no one is controlling it. In other words, if it's not controlled by state or federal guidelines, positive is going to do no good because you can't do anything with the result. So that's a limiting factor. Once it is controlled, then the lab has to acquire a standard from a reliable scientific source. We can't go to the Internet and buy a standard. We have to buy it from a reliable scientific source, a provider of standards for laboratories. That sometimes takes anywhere from 6 months to a year for them to get that product available to us. Once that product is available to us and we actually have the compound in the lab, it can take anywhere from, I would say, 6 weeks to 3 months for us to have it up and operational as part of a routine analytical screen, because we have to validate that method. We have to validate the method. We have to run side-by-side studies. We have to do linearity studies, level of detection, level of quantitation. There's all kinds of studies that we have to perform to validate that method before we can put that method in play at the laboratory. So I'd say anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months from the time we get it in the lab before we can have it available to the public.
Okay. Here's a new twist on the old-fashioned passive inhalation question.
Right.
An individual is using bath salts for its actual purpose, I suppose taking a bath, right?
Yeah.
Chemical makeups of these synthetics be transferred through the skin or inhaled during a bath and show up on a drug test?
No. You're not going to get dermal absorption, and you're not going to get inhalation. Once they enter the water, they dissolve, and then they're mixed with the water.
Okay. I know, just for giggling a little there. Now, what about cutoff levels? How does Alere determine the cutoff levels it uses for some of these drugs that are, not on many other laboratories' radar screen?
It's determined during the validation process. We determine what's called a level of quantitation, which is a level at which we can accurately and consistently quantitate a particular compound. And that level of quantitation is what we use then. If there are no established cutoff levels, is what we use as our cutoff level, as our level of quantitation.
Okay. Kendi would like to ask if it is true that ADHD medications can show a positive for PCP.
That's not true. ADH medications, and I'm assuming you're talking about an on-site test. The things that will give you a positive PCP on-site are diphenhydramine, which is Benadryl, dextromethorphan, which is the DM and cough syrup, Texor, which is an antidepressant. All of those can give you a false positive. There are also some new synthetic PCP compounds that are on the market, or not on the market, but on the Internet that are available that could potentially give you a false positive PCP, but would not confirm with the lab, obviously, because we're not testing for that product.
Okay. Attendee would like to know if you would recommend testing for soma.
Depending on the type of drug screen you're doing, I think SOMA is a great addition to a drug screen panel. It's very heavily prescribed, and we're going to pick up carciprodol as the active ingredient, but we're going to pick up the metabolite, methylbamate, on the urine drug screen test, and it's very heavily used, has been attributed to a lot of individuals who've been arrested for DUIs, driving under the influence, have actually been under the influence of SOMA compound.
Okay, perfect. I guess you've sort of answered part of this question, but let me pose it the way it's been presented here. Is it possible for individuals to try to, quote-unquote, flush their systems where ways become dilute? If so, levels of creatinine would be suspicious.
Dilute is dilute. I mean, the standards have been set by the Department of Transportation, and anything less than 20 milligrams per deciliter. If you look at a normal human in a random voiding, the creatinine should be in the range of 100 to 200 milligrams per deciliter. One drop below 100, you start diluting that urine, and when you dilute the urine, you dilute the drug. If you drink 1 liter of water, you reach a peak excretion level of approximately 8 mils a minute. A normal human voids 1 mil a minute. So 1 liter of water, you're going to push that up to 8 mils a minute, which means now you've diluted any drug present in your system by a factor of 8. So 20 is the standard. Anything less than 20 is reported as dilute. However, it will have an impact on the amount of drug anytime it goes below 100.
Okay. Well, Pat, perfect. Thank you for answering those questions. There are many others. We're out of time, but we will everybody's questions one way or the other. I have somebody on here want me to pass on to you. Great job. So
thank you.
I'll pass that on to you. With that, we'll turn the microphone back over to Jessica for our conclusion.
Thank you, Pat. That was wonderful. On behalf of Alere Toxicology, we hope you have found today's presentation informative and helpful. This presentation is recorded, and you will receive instructions informing you how to access the recording. Also, if you have submitted a question during today's presentation, an Alere representative will provide an answer either through email or by phone. For attendance today, this concludes today's webinar.
Thanks, Jessica.
Great job.